Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dry Run Financial Modeling Software, where we help the office of the CFO leave spreadsheets behind and model everything from cash flow through to complex scenarios with clarity and control. And joining me today is financial systems specialist Bob Light, and we'll be exploring processes versus systems when implementing financial software. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thanks, Blaine. Glad to be here.
So I know we talked a few weeks ago and started getting, really just off track a little bit of our conversation. I started talking about the difficulty that businesses face when they're implementing, especially ERP software, but kind of anything financially related, and some of the common places where they trip up. And you started talking about, systems versus processes. And I just wanted to dive right into that. Give me the bit of the overview of where you find businesses sort of stumbling as they build these systems and get them into place.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times a company will decide we need to implement a better system, right? We've outgrown, say, QuickBooks or something like that. We need to move up. And in order to save costs, they can say, well, we're just going to keep our existing processes and just replicate those in a new system. Mm-hmm. And the challenge with that is one, the new system is likely able to handle better processes, right? Or you're just replicating poor work anyways. So you're not going to get a good value out of that investment in that new system. So the key is really when you're looking at implementing a new tool is look at your processes first, see how can we improve these, right? How can we make them so we're going to be scalable, things like that going forward.
And like I imagine too, that when a business is actually going, like you said, like they're going, oh, we got to go from QBO, right? There's generally a reason. It's like, well, now we've got multi-entity or we've got multi-currency, so the processes very likely don't match. Like they're already a little bit broken. And so it likely makes sense, I imagine, to just go right back to the foundation and go, let's take a look at it.
Exactly. And a lot of companies don't necessarily know to ask the question, well, what can the new system do better or differently, right? We're used to this way of doing it, and we don't know. And that's where a lot of implementations fail in a new system is because they're not asking those questions up front around, how can we change our processes? What can the new system provide to help support that as well?
So where do they start? Like, what is the best, if they're just kind of sitting there, CFO sitting there going, okay, we've outgrown, we've got to get moving. And usually, it's like, and we want to do it today. Never happens today.
Right.
To give them the best chance of a success, what is their first step? What would you recommend is here's where we should start?
The first thing is really understanding where your pain point is, right? Why do you need to move systems, right? Because it's not easy to do. It's expensive to do, right? So there has to be a real driving need for that change. And then the selection of the system is driven by that need as well, right? Do you have to go straight from a QuickBooks to a NetSuite, or can you go to one of these other tools that are coming onto the market today that kind of sit in between those that provide great value, but they're a little bit more focused, right? NetSuite's broader in its base of services, products that it offers. But the key is looking and say, what is causing our pain point today, right? What are we trying to solve for? Is it scalability? Is it better reporting, right? Is it, as you say, multi-currency, multi-entity, things like that, right? Understand what it is, what your business need is, and then taking that and then looking at the processes that support what you're doing today, right? What's your order to cash process? What's your procure to pay process? What are your approval processes, right? Really understand what your needs are. And then you can take that when you go into a new system and say, okay, this is what we're trying to solve for. And that also helps you select the right new system, right? If you just say, okay, I know I need to replace QuickBooks, what do I do? Well, I can go after some slick looking new thing, which might be great on the general ledger side, but might not have the subscription billing process that you need because you're generating a lot of subscriptions, right? So understanding your process up front really helps drive that tool selection as well.
Yeah, because I can imagine that a lot of these businesses, they go, we need a new system, and if they haven't gone through that sort of process, they're talking with salespeople, and the salespeople can say, "This is the best system for your industry," and oh, okay, awesome,
Yeah.
and they'll tell you all the stuff they do. But I imagine one of the big issues is even if you do the checklist of they seem to do everything, I imagine one of the big things is, yeah, but what is the priority? Like, how would you rank the stuff that you need to do and what's number one? Because in the systems you're looking at, one of them, it might be, technically it does it, but it's kind of number 20 on its strengths.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the thing is that a lot of these, the newer ones are kind of siloed a little bit, right? You can get a really good GL tool and a really good subscription billing tool and a really good payment processing tool, right? And a really good, marketing tool or something, right? And instead of like a NetSuite, which tries to put it all together for you in one thing, now you're looking at multiple products. And then you have to consider, well, what does it take to actually integrate these tools, right? Which is going to be my system of record, right? So there's a lot of questions that need to be thought through. And sometimes the driver could be, well, we just got an investment company came in and they're telling us we have to upgrade and they want us to use NetSuite because there are other companies who use NetSuite and that makes it easier for them, right? Or some of these other tools. So understanding, what options you have is really key.
Well, and I know, like, as we talk with potential customers and our existing customers all the time, and it's interesting because there seems to be some that will what works for them is actually some of these systems like a NetSuite or D365 or Intact or whatever, and they're really quite good at doing a lot of different things, but they're not an expert kind of in anything, right?
Right.
Oftentimes, right? And this is why we bolt on, because we're an expert in an area. Like, we can help model and forecast things that they can't, and we fill a gap. But what we also see on the flip side is there's a lot of sort of industries, verticals, where they use a very specialized ERP, and it does one thing really well. Like manages our inventory or our manufacturing doohickey thingamabob, and it does that really well. And then it usually seems to drop the ball everywhere else. And I'm curious if you have some recommendations, because it seems like some businesses likely are like, we can suffer over here because we really need the really specific, or we can make it work with something a little more general. How do they kind of prioritize and pick maybe between a generalist versus a vertical?
Well, you really have to know your business well in order to make a selection like that, right? But I think the key is, again, not trying to just rush the process. I think a lot of companies say, okay, we need to do this. We get budget approval from the ELT. Now the ELT is starting to thumb screw us to get this project done, right? And you're really not putting in the time up front. And the more time you can put up front and understanding, really, like you said, where are your priorities, right? Mm-hmm. Is it supply chain management, right? Is it e-commerce website, right? The ability to take orders up front, and look at various options. Because I could go to one of these other tools and they could say, okay, we have all of that, but as you said, they're not going to be the best in doing that. So really take the time to understand what you need, and don't just listen to what the sales guys are trying to sell you, right? See what other options are out there, but you have to take into consideration, what are the maintenance costs of having separate systems, right? Do you have to pay for a Boomi or a Soligo or something like that, an iPass tool to sit in between them to transfer data back and forth? Do they have native integrations? Right? These are the kinds of questions that you have to look at and go through in order to make a determination. The great thing is today is you just have a lot more options, and the tools are getting better and better, and they're introducing AI into these tools. So, if you have, 100 transactions a month, you can make do with spreadsheets and things in your head, and you can do all the analysis you want. If you're generating 1 million transactions a month or 10 million transactions a month, then you start looking at a need for an AI to come in, and what role is that going to play in doing that data analysis that you need?
And I'm guessing the other thing is to make people really successful or to make a project really successful, you need more than one voice from an organization. So how do you get everybody around the table that you need, and how do you gain consensus on that?
Yeah, that's a great point. Because there is a line where you have too many chefs in the kitchen, right? So you need somebody that owns the project that can drive it, and it's almost a full-time job. You can't say, okay, controller, right, or VP of finance or accounting, you take on this implementation role and you lead it and get it done. They have day jobs. They're going to get distracted. It's not going to get it. But yeah, you have to have your subject matter in each of your areas, because a lot of these tools are also built to be highly customizable. So you can tailor it to your business. And it's rare to find one person that knows every aspect of your business, right? And if you bring in these subject matter experts, actual users who will be using the tool, you get their buy-in early. And that engagement will then help drive adoption easier as well when you get down to training them. Then they've already kind of seen the system. They've been involved in setting what the requirements are, right? They have some skin in that game, and that's crucial as well. You're right, because it's not just about picking the best system, it's making sure that people internally are behind it as well, because otherwise it's going to fail.
Yeah, so it's basically twofold. It's like you need all the input at the start to make sure you're picking the proper system, but you also need engagement and buy-in so that the system actually rolls out. Because we've over the years, and I'm sure you've heard a million of them, because we've heard horror stories from where these projects have gone off the tracks, right? And usually it's from even my view from the outside, it seems to be either people weren't involved in the process and the picking from the start, or they just charged down a path. They were just they followed sales. Sales said, "This is great. Okay, let's go with it." And then, we you hear every once in a while, it's like, we've actually, I got to tell you, I've probably 2 or 3 times in the last couple of months, I've literally had a CFO or a controller or someone basically say, like, we got this thing, we barely use it, it's pissing me off. It's like, they're really frustrated with it. And, but you can't go back because they've had so much time, energy, money dedicated.
Yeah.
They just got to figure out a way to make it work. And that's not a situation you want to end up in.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, it used to be called shelfware, right? Where you paid for software and it just sat on the shelf. You never did anything with it. The problem is these systems are getting more and more expensive, right? In your investment in those, and it gets very difficult to rip those out and replace with something else. Luckily, I think it's actually getting a little bit easier because there are more tools, more options coming on the market. Mm-hmm. But still, there's a lot of pain in trying to do that, right? And especially if you've just invested in one of those upgrades, in theory upgrades, right? Yeah. And 6 months later, a year later, your executive team is saying, where are the results? And you're just not able to get there. But a lot of times it's really set by the upfront, right? You put the time in upfront, understand what you're trying to get to, understand it's also not a one and done. You don't say, we're going to solve all of our problems when we implement the system, right? You want to make sure that you're solving for your immediate needs and that there will be additional enhancements as time goes by over that first year, right? There'll be a lot of tweaks, but that's where the power of these tools really lies, in the ability to say, okay, right, we're not going to do any page layouts up front, right? Because that's extra work. We don't really know what we want, but knowing that that's going to come along, and as people are using the tool, they can say, okay, this would really be helpful if this field was over here or on this tab or something like that, right? Or we had this custom field. So implementation is never one and done. When you're implementing a new system, it's always an iterative approach. Because otherwise, if you try and do it all at once, what's boiling the ocean, you're never going to get there, right?
Never get there. And and so I imagine it's like being able to predict, like future-proof as much as you can, and sort of predict what likely is going to come down the road. Like you said, like AI, like, okay, we may not need this right now, but where do we think this is going to go, and how that help as we grow and as our needs change, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's powerful capabilities, but how do you use it properly, right? I mean, I could use a chainsaw to cut wooden dowels, but I could do it faster with a handsaw, and I'm probably less likely to cut myself doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So there, because this is kind of interesting too, is that it's hey, to get some really good success here, let's do our first version here. It's not going to do everything, but it's going to do the main stuff. It's going to get people going. You're going to get feedback. You're going to get a bit of a feedback loop going. You're going to say, okay, the stuff we had planned for Q3, Q4, or next year probably will change somewhat once they're starting to use the system. So that's also an interesting, more of the implementation and evolution approach, rather than it's just like, I just have 100 check marks, and as long as you check them off, we're good, and everything's fine.
Yeah, from a project management perspective, it's like comparing waterfall, standard project management to Scrum, right? Which is iterative in nature. But in this case, it's like, okay, you're doing a lot of this work up front, you get your basics down, right? And then you plan out. As you use the system, as you learn about the system, its capabilities, right? Then you can start taking advantage of more and more. And the company should always be doing that, because the systems aren't ever going to go down in price. So you need to figure out ways to improve your utilization of the tool to just keep that ROI coming, because otherwise they're just, these companies are just going to keep, it's not even nickel and diming anymore, right? It's dollaring and whatever with their increases every year. So
yeah, things certainly aren't going down in price, and they are, like you said, they are really costly. But if they're working, if they do what you need to do, they're hitting those priorities really well. I imagine like the efficiencies and the reporting power and the insights and everything are epically powerful.
Exactly. Yeah, they save head counts easily if done properly.
Yeah. So what, just like a ballpark. So I'm a CFO, mid-market business, got 3 entities. I got a bunch of staff that, some finance, some non-finance, maybe manufacturing or whatever. And they're going, okay, we got to start looking at this. What is a kind of a ballpark sort of timeline to go, hey, you're at least going to want X amount of time to be able to properly get all of the people involved, all of the engagement, find that champion, like all these things you sort of describe. What kind of timelines would they be looking at? And then once it gets to implementation, what should they kind of expect?
Gotcha. Well, it depends to both of those, right? Depends on the complexity of the business, depends on the volume of transactions, the type of transactions. But in general, I mean, if you're just trying to implement a base ERP system, right? So I want to be able to do my invoicing, right? Do my accounts receivable, payable, general ledger, do all of the basics kind of stuff. It will depend on how much historical data you have and what system it is. I would always recommend, if you have a lot of historical data in QuickBooks, just maintain a QuickBooks license, right? A single license, that'll be your data historical repository, right? Just bring over beginning balances and start away. That greatly accelerates. If you try to bring over a lot of transactional data and put it in a new system, that'll increase the cost and the time for sure. Okay. So understanding, what are your needs are, but how many customers do you have? How many items, products do you have? Things like that all impact the time to actually implement. And to some extent, obviously, what system as well, because how many segments do you need, right? I mean, NetSuite offers you class and location, and department out of the box subsidiary would be a system segment as well. But if you need more customized reporting as well, so it really comes back to, at the end of the day, what I need to get out of my system, right? Mm-hmm. From a reporting standpoint, how do I want to be able to see my data? What do I need from a company management perspective? What are our auditors going to need? What are our financial backers going to need, right? Understanding all of that up front then allows you to select the right system and then implement better as well. But implementation, again, it's going to really depend on the age of the company and how much complexity is based on there, but probably a minimum of 4 to 5 months. Right. And you could do it faster if you're smaller and don't have a lot of complexity. But if you're anywhere with that, but you hear them running a lot longer than that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think the big thing is just don't put on a deadline and then rush it. Like
That's
take your
yeah,
time
yeah,
and make sure that
yeah.
you've
I
got
mean,
it in
often you
mind.
got to back into something. You say, okay,
Yeah.
if we want to do this, let's allow ourselves the time. But we live in a fast food world, and we want it yesterday half the time. So it's challenging to have that discipline to say, okay, we know we need to do this. Often there are external pressures on doing something faster, sometimes internal as well. But to the extent that you can push that off, keep it at arm's length, and dedicate that time up front. The more time you put up front, the better your implementation is going to be. The faster it's going to be, the more on budget. You can actually save money as well by doing some of that work yourself. I did a NetSuite implementation. The budget for it was like 120,000, and it came in at 60,000 because I just did a lot of the work myself. Right. So the more you understand the tool, the more you understand your process and what you're trying to do, then you could also save money on the implementation side. So you're going to spend it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Either upfront in your due diligence, in your requirements gathering, or after the fact in a failed implementation.
Yeah. And so if you're picking somebody, like you're saying, okay, we know we need to do some groundwork. We need to really understand it. I need to get information from a whole bunch of people and all of that. I imagine the choice of who you pick as sort of your champion or to drive this project or whatever is really pretty important, right? How do you pick? Who do you go? Did you go external? If you go internal, what attributes, like what makes a good sort of champion to move this forward?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on who's deciding that it needs to be done, right? So if the CFO is coming and he's made a decision that, okay, we've outgrown whatever system we're using, we need to improve. But usually a company is not necessarily going to do that until some external thing is putting pressure on them, right? They've gotten an investor that's come in and they want to see more capabilities out of the tool, right? Something like that. So usually that's going to be a driver, or maybe they just scaled past, right? Like you said, they have more entities or something, right? And just QuickBooks isn't doing it for them, or one of the other ones. So that becomes a driver. Internally, who do you pick? Ideally, you can have somebody that is a experience in that particular tool, right? Ideally, they've been involved in implementations, but they don't have to have been, right? The right person can manage that as well. Then they definitely need to have support of executive leadership, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
because if they, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, because if they need a resource, right, they're usually going to need it then, and they can't have somebody tell, oh, sorry, I can't see you for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, because that could delay the whole implementation as well.
Yeah. And you know, it's still that early on, you still have to figure out, okay, once we have all of our kind of our checklist of what we need, now you have to go out and figure out, well, what are all the options out there, so that, again, I'm not just making one phone call. Salesman did a great job, we're going with it.
Right.
Do you recommend them someone internally trying to do that, or engaging, like, someone like you or someone like that's an expert that can go, okay, let's figure this out. Let's look at all the different options. Let's try and pull some of these things in, so that it's kind of you haven't decided before writing the criteria for the decision you've already made, right?
Yeah, no. Again, I think there's a lot of different consultants out there. NetSuite has thousands of them, right? So even if you don't necessarily have the internal expertise to do a selection, if you're leaning towards the NetSuite, then I would suggest probably talking to one of them, right? Again, start with your requirements, know what you need. But to be honest, on some of these other tools, there are businesses starting that are focused on helping companies determine which ERP systems, which accounting systems are good for them, right? And they're aggregating that information for you. So you can go to them and say, here's what I'm looking to do. And then they say, okay, this one might meet your needs. This one might meet your needs. What is your budget? All that kind of stuff. And they can help you at least narrow that down a little bit.
Yeah, and make sure you're not missing something like important, that you can actually take a close look at everything.
Exactly. I mean, if you go online and search for ERP systems and say what are the top 10 ERP systems of 2025, and there's 5, 10 different sites that are going to tell you that, but they're not really going to give you in-depth information, right? That's a researcher sitting down and they write a 1-paragraph version about why this was good, right? They might go look at the Magic Quadrant, right, Gartner, or something like that, and see where they're slotted. That's kind of a pay-to-play game, in my opinion. So,
yeah.
But there are these companies out there, and they're either consulting companies, and they'll do it for you for a fee. But I think there's also some companies out there that are starting that will basically, they'll get a referral fee from the vendor, right? But they can at least point you in a direction of some very valid options.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost you anything because they're getting paid on the back end.
Yeah. Yeah. And but I guess that's the other thing to always look at. And when you're looking for an expert here is, there is a little bit of that follow the money trail a little bit, because it's, are you getting a truly impartial, well-informed view of what you might need, versus it's kind of a middleman with 2 or 3 platforms that they're kind of going to push. And like you said, even like Gartner is that's a great example. And there's a lot of others like it that I think a lot of people don't realize is a bit of a pay to play. And then it's, you think you're getting this impartial, and no, you're not. There's a heck of a lot more to it. And for businesses, they're putting a lot of money out, they can't afford it. And so it seems like, it might be an extra cost at the start, but there are companies out there that will help make sure that you're getting the right system for the right dollar from the right vendor and everything.
Exactly. And also go over some of those hidden costs, right? Because you have these 4 different systems and you want to be able to share data between them. Well, now I'm going to have to pay for an iPaaS tool likely, right? Unless they all have native integrations, which maybe yes, maybe no, right? So, and then who's going to manage and support that? Now that's another subscription I have to remember to do every year. And often they're not on the same schedule, right? So then if you want to change it, it becomes even more difficult, right? Because now you have these various systems that all are connected, right? So it looks like one system, but they're all in different periods of performance from a subscription standpoint, and trying to replace one of them becomes tricky, especially if it's the main one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can imagine that. You got everything plugged in and there's so many factors. So you really want to make sure you get it right. The first time.
And then you have a good subscription management product as well. So good thing is that, again, there's good ones for that. So
yeah, there's lots out there for that for sure. This has been really, really useful, Bob, really insightful. So what if somebody wanted to talk with you and just kind of bounce something off you or engage you in something? How should they reach out and get in touch with you?
Blaine, I would say they could just reach out to me on LinkedIn. But I'm always happy to have a chat with somebody, always willing to share my thoughts and opinions on something. It's not my business, consulting and telling people what to do, but I'm always glad to talk to them about what options they should be looking at, what questions they should be asking up front, what, things like that.
Like Bob said, again, connect with them on LinkedIn. And your address down there will be in the show notes. And also for those of you out there that are a CFO, heading of a finance team, and you're looking for a way to forecast your cash flow, model your finances, and understand where your business is headed, come and see us at Dry Run, because if you're in a spreadsheet, we can get you out of it, and we're going to make it fast, easy, and smooth. So you can visit us at dryrun.com.